Welcome to our morning show on WRCO Radio. We're pleased to welcome back some guests from our morning show studio, or to our morning show studios that were on a little bit earlier this year, and then they've rested well over the summer. Senator Howard Marklein represents the 17th Senate District, and Representative Tony Kurtz of the 41st Assembly District. Was it a good summer for you, Howard?
It was. I think the weather was overall pretty good, and I went to a lot of county fairs. I think I got 6 county fairs now, and which actually is down a little bit from my old district. So, and had a chance to go to some new fairs. That at Crawford County, for example, is new in my new district. So, and there's just a lot of festivals, and almost every community has some kind of festival and stuff, and there's still a lot of those coming up yet. So yeah, it was good. The crops sure looked good, at least from the road. They sure looked good. Great growing season, I think, for the most part. We had pretty good rains. A lot of farmers are having a tough time making dry hay. You could cut and chop pretty easy, but boy, getting 3 dry days in a row was kind of tough. But yeah, it was good. It was good.
How do the crops look in the Waniwak area, Tony?
They look good. The only problem with some corn, we've had some issues with some of the, tar spot and some other funguses. And then same with the beans. We've had some issues with beans too. But all in all, it has been a good growing season. But obviously, as a farmer, we can always complain about something. And prices. If you're a beef guy or a gal, you're pretty ecstatic. But I know dairy is struggling, the same with the grain guys. So,
And you've been at some county fairs?
We've had some really wonderful fairs. I was at the Richland County Fair twice and spent a good part of Saturday there, and it was just packed. I was just ecstatic how many people were there, and I was there for obviously the auction, but then I know that the Derby was a huge draw too. So no, it was great. It was great to see. But we had good weather, and it was a wonderful fair. So
yeah, well, good to have you guys in here. I wanted to start off kind of on a somber note. We talked about the recent violence and the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and recently the senator in Minnesota. Not an easy time, Howard, to be somebody out there in the forefront.
Yeah, and it's just unfortunate. I just grieve for all those families that are victims of the violence. And last month I attended a national conference. It's called NCSL as the organization. NCSL, bipartisan, both parties there, and they did a segment. One of the first segments of that convention was on the violence, kind of a follow-up to what happened in Minnesota with the speaker and the senator up there. And so, and we had some really, really good speakers. The senator that survived the Minnesota shooting was there, spoke, and then the Gabby Gifford from Arizona spoke, and it was very good. But they had a little panel and talked about how did we get here, and what are the contributing, and these are all just opinions, okay? So they can't prove it, but, I think there was consensus by a number of people that, today, we have with technology, unfortunately, if I've got crazy thoughts, violent thoughts, and I'm doing violent, playing games that are violent and all this stuff, and I'm isolated. I'm in my basement on my computer and doing this stuff. 40, 50 years ago, I would be isolated. There'd be nobody else encouraging that kind of thought. And today, there's somebody out there on the internet that's probably going to say, yeah, Phil, go do it, kind of thing. And I think that contributes to this. And then the other thing I think that is a factor is the way many people isolate. Okay, you can work from home, you can order your groceries, from you don't have to get out for anything anymore, and we're seeing fewer and fewer people joining civic groups, the Lions Club, and that sort of thing, and fewer people going to church. And and I guess the point here is we're having less face-to-face dialogue and talking, and so which I think just helps feed into some of these extremist, violent, kinds of acts, and so I don't know. I mean, it's just unfortunate. It really is, and it's both sides. I mean, I'm not. This is both sides. I'm sure Tony hears it too from it's just we got to tone it down a little bit here, and I think it's also disappointing when people disagree with you. Therefore, I hate you. Because I don't know. There's and I enjoy having good conversations with people that disagree with me. And I've got. It's fun. I enjoy it. We have a lot of banter back and forth, and we're friends. And we probably disagree on 50% of the issues at least. So.
But that's old school, though.
That's old school. That's again, it's talking one-on-one with people, and so I don't know. I did just again this whole violence thing it's unfortunate, and I hope that I hope and maybe it took this assassination last week to get people to wake up and get some, I guess, common sense, and hopefully we don't have to go through this again.
Tony, anything you wanted to add?
No, Howard's. I first of all, just my thoughts and prayers of the Kurtz family. I mean, that's two beautiful children. Not going to have a father now, but. Obviously, what happened in Minnesota to the rep up there and her husband. Once again, it's just senseless, and I think I'm 58 years old, and I don't think we don't really understand something has changed. And to Howard's point, something has changed in the last 30, 40, or 50 years. I know some people want to focus on, it's just the weapon. No. Something in society, something in our DNA, something has changed. And until we can figure it out, I think Howard's very accurate on where he thinks it's. I also think social media is not, on one hand, being able to buy things online. And obviously we did that around COVID. We had for some of us had to isolate. But I don't think overall it's been healthy for our society. And one thing about Charlie Kirk, and that's the thing, I don't think people truly understand the following that he had. He was, I'm not a new technology person, but his podcast was in the top 10 worldwide almost every week. He had a huge following, and it was particularly those individuals below the age of 35. My daughter's 27. She's going to be a pharmacist one of these days. She listened to his podcast. So this had far-reaching implications that maybe somebody my age don't understand. I had a couple of my colleagues that are below the age of 30. These are elected officials. They literally were in tears. So I don't think maybe the three of us in this room truly understand his impact and what he meant to younger people. But it's something. Like when my own daughter said, "Oh, I listened to him," I was like, "Oh, wow." Her boyfriend listened to him. So it's something that's like, wait a minute, there's something more to this. And I think you see that as you're seeing just the outrage, but also the outpouring. But I will say something else too. And what bothers me the most is how people are justifying, basically, you're seeing on social media and other aspects where people are actually saying he deserved it based on his comments. That, to me, in my very humble opinion, is the problem. The rep that died in Minnesota, she was a Democrat. The last thing I would want is something like that to help happen to some of my colleagues who might be on the other side of the aisle. I would never ever say something like that and wish that upon somebody. But to have the people out here, and to be honest with you, Phil, there are people in this county and it's on both sides of the aisle. I mean, I'm not saying both sides are I'm not going to say responsible, but are, in my humble opinion, are contributing to this. So I think we do need to dial it down and get back to the basics of actually looking somebody in the eye and talking to them and saying, you know what, I disagree with you, but I still respect you.
This week they talked a little bit about safety at the state or the Capitol building. Howard, any comment on that? Do you feel it's safe, or do you need to have restrictions on visitors and things like that?
So our state capitol is probably one of the most open, accessible state capitals in the country. You know, I've been to some other state capitals, and you got to go through security and metal detectors and all that. So, and you know, I like the openness. This is the people's capital. It's not mine, and it's not Tony Kurtz's. You know, it's the people. So they ought to be able to, you know, come in and stuff. But and we've talked about this in the past. I mean, you can come in. There are multiple entrances, okay, which is potentially a problem. Maybe you can come in on the ground floor, multiple entrances, 4 entrances on the first floor. I mean, so, you know, I don't know. I guess, you know, I think that I know that, like, the new Senate Sergeant at Arms, he's very much into safety and stuff, and he's a former military background, and I'm glad that he is there now, because he's much more focused on safety than people were 15 years ago or whatever. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so he's watching people. He's, you know, and even in committee meetings. When Tony and I are in Joint Finance Committee, when somebody just starts walking up to the dais where we're sitting, he will stand in front of them. You know, he'll intercept them. You know, because he doesn't know why they're coming up, and they may be coming up to hand us a piece of paper or something like that. But you know, and I appreciate that caution. So I think there've been some improvements made. Just based on the personnel that are now in charge of the operation of the legislature. So I hope we don't have to get down to a point where we're just locked down and you know, I've seen people go through like in Denver, and you know, they'll have something in their pant, you know, a piece of metal, and you got to take it out, and you got to leave it here, throw it out then and stuff. And it's, I don't know, you know, mm-hmm. I like our situation today in Madison. I hope hope we continue to be safe, and you know, I guess I'm not advocating for locking it down at this point, but we'll have to see. That's not my call. That'll be made by the leadership in both houses.
Tony, you're an ex-military guy too. Does that make you more aware of your surroundings?
Oh, it definitely makes me aware of my surroundings. But I tend to agree with Howard here. I like that people can come and go in our beautiful capital, and it is. And to be fair, I don't think someone's going. I shouldn't say. We're targets no matter where we're at. I mean, I think the Capitol, we have Capitol Police. They're very visible. They're very around. I think it's going to be out and about. I mean, like, you know, today I was at the family restaurant, and so it's. I like our Capitol situation. We have a beautiful Capitol. I like that it's open, and I think it would be a tragedy if we had to close it down.
Education in the news. I know you guys, did some things, gave some bonuses for education in terms of special ed and different things like that. Howard, did you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, in the budget, obviously Tony Kurtz and I both serve on Joint Finance Committee, and so we were pleased with the increase in the special education funding. I mean, that was a historic increase. And in the special education funding, we ratcheted up what I call kind of the regular special education payments. We increased that quite a bit, but the high cost special education, which is a separate category, and these are the situations where it costs more than $30,000 a year for a student. And in our small rural school districts, I'll tell you what, you get a student, and this has happened, unfortunately, where in October, a new student moves in to Weston, and they are, and the cost might be $100,000 a year. So in the past, when you were only reimbursed the small, a third of that, that's an incredible amount of cost that came from the other students, basically from the general fund to fund this high cost special education. We increased that funding to 90% in this last budget. So again, I think that is really going to help the small rural districts where one student can really have a huge impact on your budget. I don't know if it's going to help a Madison or more, some of these big metro school districts. I think the numbers are so big, and they can probably plan for it. But it should help our small districts.
Mm-hmm. Anything, Tony?
Well, no. To Howard's point, a lot of people don't understand. You have that one child, and this is where a lot of people don't understand the special education. This is something we, as a state, and all states have to do. Special education funding, basically, it was a federal law how many years ago was passed and upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court that basically every child has a right to an education. And so, to Howard's point, one child, especially high cost, I mean, some of our smaller school districts actually have to pay for transportation for those individuals, maybe to go to Madison or maybe to go to La Crosse. And to Howard's point, those larger school districts in the Madisons or in La Crosse, they have the services there, so they don't have to, because transportation costs are a huge part. So I think one of the things as we traveled around the state and did our listening sessions as the budget committee, that was by far the number one thing we heard about help with special education. Now, one thing unique that a lot of listeners don't understand, and I think I think is our responsibility, when we provide money for special education funding, once again, due to that federal law, we can never back down from that money now. So the money that we put into special education last budget is money that will always stay there now. And so now we've created a new base level funding. To me, that's what is pretty significant, because if we do have a downturn in the economy and for some reason the state has to cut back, we can't cut back on that because we could get basically sued by the federal government. And so it's called a maintenance of effort. And so I think to have the 90% for the high costs, and now in the second year of the budget we'll be at 45% for special education funding, I think was pretty huge, especially for our districts in this part of the state.
I know there's a bill talking more about dual credits and those counting for high school students. Have you looked over that?
I have not looked at. I know that's a big thing, and I know a lot more of our students are doing that. But that's something I have that's on my to-do list to look further in that.
Mm-hmm. So. And curriculum, too. I know they've talked a lot about reading was a real focus, Howard, and I think math might even be on the forefront, too, focusing on that a little bit more.
Yeah. And I think there's just been a renewed interest in the basics, math and reading. And reading is such an important skill. I mean, if you, especially early on in your educational path, if you can't read, almost every other subject is going to be a challenge. Even math. I mean, a lot of the math problems are story problems, or you got to read and understand what the problem is before you can attempt to solve it. So I'm fully supportive of again focusing on those core activities, and also the other thing I think is we're seeing much more interest in our schools, and that is on the tech issues and stuff. I mean, there are some incredible opportunities out there for students coming out of our high schools, and not every student is probably should go to college. I think there historically has been a strong emphasis that you got to go to college, you got to get a 4-year degree. You'll never make anything of yourself if you don't have it, and all that stuff. Well, boy, I'll tell you, there's some people in the trades and all kinds of skills or careers that, man, they're making good money. And so I'm glad that a lot of our schools are kind of refocusing, some of their efforts again. I think that stuff kind of went away in the past, and so we're seeing, renewed interest and stuff. So I saw something from, this is several years ago, that they did a correlation of when districts started to cut back on their tech ed shop and some of those classes, and the dropout rate increased. Okay, this is statewide, which is interesting because some of those people, I had classmates that were incredibly successful after they didn't go to college. They were gearheads and proud of it, in high school, and they were very, very successful. And so, those are the kinds of students too that, if you don't have those kind of hands-on opportunities for some of those skills, I think we may lose them in our school system, which we need to keep them in school.
Oh, honestly, you get them into the workforce a little bit faster too.
But you're seeing more. To Howard's point, our school districts, especially in this area, they have pivoted. I mean, they are. I mean, the more hands-on, the different fields they're doing, and the tech colleges are doing very good responding to that. And once again, the businesses around here have partnered with that. They're embracing that because they get that young man or woman right out of school. And once again, a lot of them are coming out of school with no debt. I mean, and those jobs are needed, and it's interesting. A lot of those jobs, guess what? They're not going to get shipped overseas. Mm-hmm. So
Southwest Tech and Fenimore has done marvelous. For
absolutely.
So absolutely. We'll take a break and be back with more on the morning show in a moment. We have Howard Marklein, Tony Kurtz in the studio with us for their monthly visit here on WRCO. State Senator Howard Marklein, Representative Tony Kurtz in our studios today to talk about statewide topics. As we were talking about education a little bit, I know there was recently a bill, or I guess it was being talked about, the possibility of consolidation among the rural schools. And Howard, I know that's kind of probably a dirty word for some people, but they were talking about districts, if they voluntarily went ahead and agreed to consolidate, that there would be a bonus and those kind of things. Have you read up on that, or do you know a lot about that? I
really haven't. I think that was a proposal in the Assembly, so I really haven't looked at it closely at all. So, and our schools are so important to our communities, and you take away some of our schools, and there's probably there's not much. At least what some people think, there's not much left there. So that conversation, it's probably, like we were talking earlier about having a conversation. It's probably a good conversation to have respectfully and all that. But the communities need to be engaged with that. And so one of the things that I look at when I look at my school districts is the number of their enrollment, okay? And, I've got a school district that has got an enrollment of 4,100 students. It's huge, And so, but then we've got a lot of small little school districts, and of, Seneca 270 and Schulzberg 300 and stuff. So anyway, and one of the things that I've had conversations with my district administrators, and what is like the minimum number of students that you should be graduating, okay? Because you're graduating 18, I'm making up a number here. Is that enough to offer foreign languages and some of these opportunities and stuff, so because we've got a number of districts that are kind of in that in that range, and And the scary part of it, the scary part for me, is that the numbers are going to get worse before they get better. When a lot of administrators have shown me their junior year and senior year enrollment, and they look at their first grade, second grade, third grade, and unfortunately, the 10 years from now, it's going to be a lot worse. So I don't know. It's other states have looked at this, and years ago, Minnesota and Iowa both looked at this many years ago. So I don't know. Where I have not had a chance to look at the proposal that's out there, but it's worth a conversation. I'm not, and it's going to be a difficult conversation.
You have a lot of small school districts in your area, Tony.
I do. So our assembly district touches 18 different school districts.
Wow.
And to Howard's point, we got the large ones. Probably the Dells is probably the biggest one, Wisconsin Dells, and obviously wonderful Weston is the smallest. But I do think it is something we need to have a conversation about and to see what that looks like. Believe it or not, there is under state law right now, there is a method for schools to consolidate. The problem is it's not a very good enticement for schools to do that. They actually get punished in like the fourth year once they do that. And so Representative Joel Kitchens, he's the chair of the Education Committee. He's the one that is kind of looking at all this and the series of consolidation bills. And basically, to your point, when you kind of did the teaser, it would incentivize schools to do that. But I do think it's something as a state we need to look at. I mean, I think we need to have a good civil conversation about it and talk about it. And to be very fair, if you look at it, I know I'm going to make some people upset when I bring this up, but the campus out here, Richland campus, when the UW system made the decision to close this campus and others, the campus up in Wausau just announced the other day it's closing. So, and one of the reasons for it, if you look at their fall enrollment in statewide in the two-year campuses, it's drastically down again. So demographics, we've talked about that. I know I've sat at this table and talked about, 2026 will be the lowest graduating class in the state of Wisconsin. And Howard kind of mentioned the point, the trend is down, demographics. It's, if you read any major, like Wall Street Journal, they talk about just about how the demographics issue is going to affect the United States, and it's affecting Wisconsin. It's affecting all Midwest states. We just simply do not have the birth rates like we had back in the 50s and 60s, and unfortunately, we have to come to that reality that we don't. And we know how many kindergartners started school. The count's going to be September 15th. Well, here in the next couple of days, and so we'll have those figures here in a couple of weeks to see how many kindergartners we have, and then once again we can plan that out till graduation. And unfortunately, the numbers aren't like they were years ago. So it's something we need to talk about.
What's the status of UW Baraboo?
I know they're doing a lot of discussions right now. I know there's a regents meeting coming up. Like I said, I actually got contacted from the folks up in Marshfield, because obviously they have a two-year campus, and I know that they're looking at a couple things. I actually had a breakfast with the new county administrator, and we were talking about the $2 million that we were able to get in the last budget, and that money for the campus to help revitalize the campus out here. And I know we have a little work to do with WEDC because they're being a little difficult right now, but that money is still available. But yeah, the other two-year campuses, if you look at their enrollments to the ones that are open, they're pretty low as well. So.
From one of our news stories here, Howard, wanted to have you comment on Wisconsin Supreme Court deeming statutes to be unconstitutional for allowing legislative committees to block state executive agencies from publicizing final administrative rules approved by the governor. Would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So the way the process has worked for 100 years or better is that the legislature would pass laws, would go to the governor would sign the bill, and it becomes law. And then generally the legislature would grant rulemaking authority to the agencies, and to work out the details, the when the application is due and the form and all these kind of nitty gritty little things to run a program. Okay, and then that rule would come back through the legislature. It's called JOCR, the Joint Committee on Review of Administrative Rules, or JCRAR. And so anyway, so and it worked really pretty effectively, okay, because it came back, the legislature, and again, we're closer to the people than the state Supreme Court, okay? Tony's at the Richland County Fair. He talks to people, okay? So we're much more, and so the idea there is to come back and have oversight over these rules, see if they make sense. I would, in the vast majority, I mean, I 90+% of the rules are approved as submitted, okay? But there have been cases where we've said, hey, listen, this doesn't make sense or whatever, go back, tweak it and stuff. So anyway, so the Supreme Court basically said that now that process isn't used anymore, can't be used anymore. So, and the consequences of that can be pretty significant, okay? Because basically what you're doing is you are empowering the bureaucracy, you're empowering the executive branch incredibly. And I don't think people understand, this stuff is all inside baseball. We live it, as a legislature, we know what's going on. The average person out here doesn't. They don't have an idea of what the consequences of this will be, but it's significant. And I don't know, maybe I shouldn't jump in here, but do you want to talk a little bit about the increase in the fees, Tony?
So,
because I think that is directly related to that.
But I want to emphasize what Howard said. Once again, this has been across Republicans, Democrats for decades. It's not something new that the Republican legislature is all. This is something, the rule process and the way it's been done has been this way for decades. And now basically you're telling the administration and their agencies, once you implement these, now that's law. So to Howard's point, we've been getting a lot of calls because DATCAP, Department of Ag, Trade and Consumer Protection, is proposing a fee increase on basically livestock handlers. And when you talk about a fee increase, you might think maybe 10-20%. Well, no, you're almost talking a 1,700% increase on some of these livestock handlers. And so that's where the current fee is $420. The fee would go up to over $7,800. It's a $1,700 increase. And so Wisconsin Farm Bureau has been very proactive on getting what they call a call of action, because you have now you have a comment period. So public comments, DATCAP is taking public comments on the rule, and that is literally the only way it's going to change, is if the Secretary Romansky and his agency says, yeah, this is pretty excessive. Or they can say, no, we're going to keep that in place. And we, as a legislature, we have no say in that. Now, we could implement a law or do something, but once again, we'd have to get the governor to sign it. That takes time. But before, we could stop it and say, this is a little excessive. Maybe a 10-20% increase, which, to be fair, in the state budget, we did do some increases on different fees. But they were, maybe 10% or 12%, but a 17% increase. And who is it going to hurt, Phil? 1,700% increase. It's going to hurt our small livestock handlers in Richland County, in Grant County, in Crawford County, in Vernon County. That's who it's going to hurt the most. And I've talked to a couple of them, and they said this could drive me out of business if this goes through.
Yeah.
I when I was at the Iowa County Fair a couple weeks ago, that's one of the things that I heard over there pretty loud and clear, and this fee increase anyway. And again, stepping back to your original question regarding this process, the court and all this stuff, I just hope people have an appreciation for, again, how much power is being consolidated into the executive branch. It could be on any number of issues, and I don't think I've chatted with some people. I said, don't you think someday there's going to be a Republican governor and a Democratic legislature, and I think that they're going to cringe at, like, why did we do this, or on a whole number of issues. So I don't know. The balance of power has certainly shifted from the legislature to the executive branch, and long term, I don't know if that's a good thing.
And it's also people that transport. So there's about 1,000 truckers that have licenses to transport livestock, and that fee increase, if it goes through, what DAT cap, that's a 517% increase. It would go from $60 to $370. And like I said, I that to me is, but that's why public comments, any of your listeners can make a public comment that this is, and maybe some people support it. I haven't found one yet, but it's pretty excessive.
When does that come up for a vote? I mean, is there a deadline?
Well, no, it's basically the public comment period right now. I'm actually trying to pull up the dates right now and find out when the different comments, because I know Farm Bureau has been putting out a lot about it, and I would hope some of the other ag groups have also been putting a lot of things about it. I think it's to October 15th.
Okay.
So you got September 11th, September 16th, September 17th is when they're holding the hearings up at in Madison, and written comments have to be submitted by October 15th.
A comment from a listener, and we were talking a little bit earlier about the internet. I'm not sure if either of you can comment on this, but AI question. Is there a legal disclaimer that can be added to AI content so people know what is AI generated and what's legitimate and what's not, Howard?
Excellent question, and I don't know that there is any tag or anything at this point, but it is. AI has the potential to make our lives good, easy, streamline it, more productive. It also has the ability to confuse people incredibly, because I can do a. I can't do, but somebody smarter than I could do a thing with Phil Nee, and you swear it was Phil Nee. Your lips are moving and all that stuff, but it's not you. And I guess down the road here, when it comes to political stuff, I'm curious how that's gonna work out, because you can do almost anything now. It's scary, and I know like the legislature, the Legislative Fiscal Bureau, who Representative Kurtz and I rely on a lot for their analysis and research and all that stuff. They are very, very cautious about using AI. They don't want, because you can do. I can put a brilliant paper in front of you, with conclusions and analysis and all that stuff, and it may not be right. So they're kind of backing off, kind of forcing their analysts to kind of, again, be old school and do the research and not use AI. And it may take them longer to do that research, but I feel more confident that the opinions that we get from them is going to be honest and the truth, and something that was generated out there on the internet someplace.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sound bites could come into play, like they could put words in your mouth pretty
exactly
easily.
Yeah.
But I know as a state we have looked at different legislation. I know the federal level's looking at this. I know some of the search engines that I use, it'll say AI generated. So some of that is happening, but I do think as this gets more and more, I want to say mainstream, we do have to have some, I hate to say it, some protocols in place on how people are going to know that. The deep fakes, like Howard's point, so I have a colleague, Representative Shannon Zimmerman. He is like at least in the assembly, he's kind of the guru when it comes to the technology stuff. And last year, he kind of made some funnies with us of each individual, and it was all stuff that he did on AI, and it was like you couldn't tell the difference. It was staggering about how it was like, whoa. I mean, the voice tones, but there needs to be some controls in place. But
that's scary.
Those are.
Yeah.
This conversation, for your listeners, this is live.
Yeah.
here in studio today, right? So we're not
We're not
AI generated.
No. I did talk to a couple of classroom teachers who were in the studio, and they talked about what you talked about, Howard, papers, term papers, but they're going back to make and write them in class just to be sure that it's their work,
And one of the things that I think you're hearing some people do too is to like when it comes to research or analysis, is to come in and explain your research to me. One-on-one, justify in your own words, what does this mean? And now if you did it, if you did the research and analysis, you shouldn't have too hard of a time explaining your opinion and supporting your opinion. If it came off the internet last night at 10:30, well, you might struggle a little bit. So I think you're going to see maybe again, that's kind of old school stuff. It's using technology, but we got to use maybe some old school conversations too to explain and justify the research that was done.
Most that thing you used in accounting school that.
Abacus.
Abacus. Yeah. So one of the things that my prior life that I did often was to do I called it review by interview. So manager would bring in an audit file, and it's just beautiful, ticked and tied and everything, and I'd put it aside and I'd say, Phil, tell me, what's this business's biggest risk? Who's their biggest customer? Who's their biggest supplier? What are the supply chain risks? Explain to me, what's their interest rate risk? What happens if interest rates go from here to here? What's that going to do? And if you can't explain and answer those questions, then you haven't done a very good audit. I don't care what the file says.
Very true. Do you have a blue book for me?
No, but we will very shortly.
They're coming up.
Today.
I use those for trivia, so and people in your areas can get those, right?
Yes. They'll get ahead of the curve here. They'll study up and be ready for your question.
For Trivia-thon.
They get delivered to the office, I think, today or tomorrow.
Okay. Well, next time you can bring one for us.
Absolutely.
All right. Tony will be back next week. Howard, you'll be back in a couple of months, I guess.
So I did want to mention, if I could, because it'll, for timing wise, there's a Senate Scholar program that's been going on for a long, long time. And the applications, Senate Scholars are, there's 33 Senate districts, and there's a Senate Scholar per district, and this is for high school juniors and seniors from all over the state, and they spend basically a week in Madison with us, with their colleagues from around the state. And anyway, the application is due on November 7th, which I think that might be ahead of the next time I'm here. So I wanted to put that out there. It's a great opportunity. And it's interesting to talk to some of these students years later. And so anyway, if you're interested, probably the best thing to do is just contact our office, and we can give you the link for applying for that.
Okay. Tony, anything else you wanted to add?
No, it's interesting. So we had a young man, obviously, when the district used to go up in the Mauston area. His name was Connor Harchie. Connor actually did this program with Senator Marklein a few years ago, and now he actually works in the Capitol. So it's kind of interesting how it's kind of full circle for some of these young men and women. So,
indeed. Thanks for coming in.
Well, take care. Have a
good
day.
Conversation today.
Thank you, Phil.
You bet. Senator Howard Marklein and Representative Tony Kurtz joining us for today's morning show.